educator who is free to raise my children in our amazing and wonderful city of Calgary, I am so proud to have our students sing the national anthem this morning. May God continue to bestow his kindness and peace upon all of us. Please rise.
Before we begin today's ceremony, we acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, which includes the Black First Nation of Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Good afternoon, and thank you so much to everyone for being here today. Today is a very special day. Today marks Calgary's first International Holocaust Remembrance Day. 75 years ago today, the largest extermination center created by Nazis, Auschwitz, was liberated. I'm going to deviate from my speech for one quick moment. We are so fortunate today to have an actual survivor who was liberated 75 years ago today. He was 4.5 years old. His name is Morris Danziger, and he considers today to be his second birthday. So Morris, on behalf of everyone in this room, happy birthday. My name is Dahlia Libin, and as the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors, I want to thank the City of Calgary for initiating this Day of Remembrance and for unanimously voting to support it. The Holocaust was an unparalleled genocide, total and systemic, from 1933 to 1945 by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. Its goal was to extinguish the Jewish people from the face of the earth. Over 6 million Jewish men, women, children, and babies, and 5 million non-Jewish individuals, 11 million in total, were brutally murdered and tortured by the hands of men and women who simply did not want these people to exist because of their religion, their physical abilities, their political views, and their sexual identities. It has been both shocking and incredibly disheartening to learn about the recent surveys showing that much of the Canadian population is unaware of this and the events of the Holocaust. Confronting anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred is as critical now as it has ever been. We as a city are standing up today and taking a step in ensuring our community will learn from the moral and societal failures that made the Holocaust possible, and to learn from those who resisted and fought back to save lives and stand up for what was right. Today, we take a moment and remember and honor the innocent lives lost. To remember the little boys and girls who were barbarically taken from their homes and tortured to death. To remember the men and women and children brutally starved and gassed in the extermination camps. To remember the men and women lined up and shot in mass graves, to remember the victims, and to remember and honor the survivors who picked themselves up and started new lives. I stand here today and I am overwhelmed by emotion as I think about how it is nothing short of a miracle that my grandparents survived the Holocaust and that I am here today because of that. I'm a third-generation descendant of Holocaust survivors. All four of my grandparents were the sole survivors of their large families. They lost everyone they loved and everything they had. My grandfather, Mike Bear, survived numerous concentration camps and extermination camps and just barely survived the death march. Upon liberation, he was described as a living corpse. My grandmother, Sala Zisman, survived life in a ghetto, forced labor, and the starvation and torture of Auschwitz. My grandfather, Socher Kravitz, survived hunger, disease, and forced labor. And my grandmother, Sonia Segalovich, survived starvation and harsh conditions while hiding and fighting in forests. She remembered saying goodbye to her mother, who was the one who encouraged her to sneak out of the ghetto one night to try to save herself. 4 individuals survived and were completely alone without anything. My grandmother Sonia recalled how the one thing she had was a strong will to live. They picked themselves up in displaced persons camps and started new lives. They planted roots and worked tirelessly from nothing to have what every human being wants and needs, a family. I am their legacy. Their great-grandchildren are their legacy. And I am beyond moved and proud of our city today. Commemorations such as this are helping me carry out my promise to my grandparents that I will do all that I can to not let what happened to their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, neighbors, rabbis, teachers, and themselves ever again. I thank you so much for listening to me and allowing me to share this with you. I welcome everyone to please walk through the Yad Vashem exhibit titled Shoah, How Is It Humanly Possible?, located just behind us after the ceremony. The exhibit looks at key historical aspects of the Holocaust, beginning with Jewish life in pre-Holocaust Europe and ending with the liberation of Nazi concentration and extermination camps across the continent and the remarkable return to life of the survivors. The panels feature explanatory texts interspersed with personal stories of the victims, quotes, original photographs, and images of relevant artifacts. I would now like to welcome Sid Cyngiser to come up and share some words with us. It is a privilege to have Sid with us today and to be given the opportunity to listen to his story. Sid is a Holocaust survivor and the sole survivor of his family. He has been speaking to groups and sharing his story for 36 years. He has been presented and recognized with special honors and awards throughout the years, including an honorary doctorate from the University of Calgary in recognition for his contribution to society in promoting tolerance and understanding. Sid is married to Branya, who is also a Holocaust survivor, and they have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. Please help me welcome Sid Cyngiser.
Good afternoon. I feel very privileged to have been given the opportunity to share a few words with you today as the City of Calgary commemorates the first annual citywide International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As both a Holocaust survivor and a proud Calgarian, I would like to congratulate and commend Mayor Nenshi, Calgary City Council for the vision, foresight, and commitment that they have shown towards raising awareness about the Holocaust by formally recognizing and proclaiming this day. And in particular, I'd like to express my gratitude to Councillor Diane Colley Urquhart for leadership in bringing the praiseworthy initiative to fruition. Today's date, January 27th, which was designated as International Holocaust Remembrance Day by the United Nations, marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp in 1945. And as I stand here before you, I cannot help but reflect back to where I was and what I personally experienced when I myself was liberated from the Nazi concentration camp 75 years ago in 1945. I was 21 years old and had already lost my mother, my three younger sisters, whose lives had been cut cruelly short in the gas chambers of the notorious Treblinka death camp. My father, too, had already died of starvation and exhaustion, his body thrown into a mass grave. I had endured 3 years of forced labor under the harshest and most inhumane conditions, subjected to beating, degradation, continual fear, and constant hunger. Weak, severely malnourished, dehydrated, and gravely ill, I was no longer able to move, and had been left to die at the camp by the retreating Nazi guards. No longer able to eat, I'd been reduced to a mere skeleton on the verge of death. When I was liberated by the advancing Allied troops, indeed after the first months of care in hospital, I weighed only 33 kilos. On that day, in that place, the very thought that I would be alive and standing before you today in this fine city of Calgary, in this wonderful country of Canada, was something that did not seem even remotely possible. It has been 70 years since my wife, Bronya, who is also a Holocaust survivor, and I arrived here in Calgary as new immigrants. And we feel certainly grateful each and every day for having been blessed with the privilege and opportunity living and rebuilding our lives in this magnificent city. The Holocaust has shown us unspeakable depths to which hatred and intolerance can lead. And today, 75 years later, amid worrisome signs of anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination and hatred are on the rise and becoming an increasing threat not only in Canada, but around the world. The universal importance of the lessons learned from the Holocaust remains relevant and crucial as ever. As Calgarians and as citizens of this great land of Canada, we have all so much to be grateful for, so much to be proud of, and so much that we must safeguard. The equality, tolerance, respect of human rights, and democracy that we enjoy, cherish, can never be taken for granted. I, who have been to the other side of freedom, can tell you how precious those values are. Anytime that anti-Semitism and racism manifest themselves, they endanger, they undermine the values that we hold so dearly and threaten the fabric of the pluralistic and multicultural society that we are so proud of. As Calgarians and as citizens of Canada, we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that the seeds of intolerance or hatred do not take root in our community. If the Holocaust has taught us anything, it is above all to respect the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. Whatever the origin and creed, we are all of us part of the same human family, all of us free and equal. The 18th century statesman and philosopher Edmund Burke once said, "All that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing." By unanimously adopting the motion to formally recognize the proclaimed January 27th as our city's annual Holocaust Remembrance Day, the good men and women of Calgary City Council have chosen action over indifference, and have chosen to take a proactive stand against evil, anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hatred. Like myself, many other Holocaust survivors have made Calgary their home, but we survivors are now in our twilight years, and the day is not far off when there will be none of us left to bear witness. It is therefore extremely heartening for us to know that Calgary City Council stands shoulder to shoulder with us and is committed to preserving the memory of the Holocaust in order to help ensure that the important lessons that must be learned from the dark time in history are carried forward and imparted to future generations. As a survivor of the Holocaust, it is my fervent hope that future generations of Calgarians and Canadians will live in a society and a world that is free of hatred and injustice, a world of tolerance, understanding, mutual respect and inclusiveness, in which all humankind can live in dignity, freedom and harmony. Thank you.
Please rise for the memorial prayer for the deceased. Maleh Rahamim Shochein Bameromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanefei Hashchina B'malot Kiroshim U'Tohorim K'Zohar Harakiya Mazhirim L'nishmot kol ele shenitbechu b'shoah anashim nashim v'taf שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירם בסר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם ונאמר Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the souls of all who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children, who were slaughtered, suffocated, and burned to ashes. May their memory endure and inspire deeds of goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear survivors, thank you very much for the warm welcome, Dahlia, and for the invitation. I'm very honored to speak to you today. Undoubtedly, the 27th of January reminds us on one of the darkest chapters in humankind. When soldiers of the 60th Army of the 1st Ukrainian Front opened the gates of Auschwitz concentration camp on January 27, 1945, the world saw what human beings are capable of. By honoring this date, the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we not only honor the memory of the 6 million Jewish and other victims of the Holocaust, but we also give a promise to never forget. Especially for me, as a German and a historian, this date is both a warning and a mission. But we all need to reflect what history means for our times. Some of my colleagues do not believe in Cicero's Historia Magistra Vitae, history as the teacher of life or life's instructor. They stress that history cannot act as an instructor and that history has happened in the past and the present has its own challenges to bear. This is certainly true, the present has challenges to bear. But for me, this is the way human beings learn. Try and error, gain insights, and learn from prior experiences and mistakes. The study of the Holocaust helps us to look back and see where warning signs were missed, where unintended consequences were ignored. We owe the victims to look back and see who was lost. We have to remember what the world lost in the Holocaust. But we also need this looking back for understanding our present, our future. We cannot fail again by ignoring the risks of rising anti-Semitism. We cannot fail again by not learning from our failures. The rupture in civilization, as historian Dan Diner called the Holocaust in 2008, is a result of both the historical and the conceptual engagement with this event. Its manifest content seeks to combine both approaches, a particular one and a universal one. The particular perspective reflects the experience undergone by Jews of having been destroyed everywhere and solely because they are belonging. It was hence the experience of being exposed to total extermination without any reason. Never before had anything of this kind taken place, a rupture in civilization carried out upon the Jews. But the significance of the concept is further reaching. The concept of rupture in civilization seeks to denote the indeed singular circumstance of the extermination of human persons by human persons as the transgression of all the ethical and instrumental limits of comportment which had been so far considered as certain and secure. Transgression of this kind marks a rupture that is carried out upon all mankind. Following this view, the Holocaust affects us all. Whether we are Jewish or not, German or not, survivor, victim, perpetrator, bystander, or witness. Even if we are not involved at all, being human beings make us being part of the story. 75 years after, it seems we have to fight more than ever human rights violations, inequality, and anti-Semitism in the entire world. Anti-Semitism is on the rise globally, but it is no resurgence. It is the same old evil which was hidden by appropriate behavior or socially desired statements or social convention in the aftermath of the Holocaust. The shameless openness of current anti-Semitic behavior might be new, at least for the most of us. This openness is based on a changing climate that is connected to the historical distance. The wish to close this chapter of the book of history, to draw a line, the idea, especially in Germany, that Germans suffered enough for the doings of their ancestors, the trust in democracy, which is related with egoism and lack of information. As we heard before, the Israeli Foundation figured out in 2018 that 1 in 5 Canadian students do not know what happened in the Holocaust, or they are not sure about. In Germany, a study published in 2017 from the Kerber Stiftung showed similar findings. 41% of the participants never heard the name Auschwitz. To prevent hate and to build knowledge, to build peace, knowledge is a powerful tool. And the Holocaust is a warning that technological progress is no more moral progress. Tom Friedman said 2016, while everybody lives in the cyberspace, no one is in charge. To know about the systematic destruction of Jews and Jewish life by the Nazi regime in Germany 1933 to 1945, and to emphasize the commemoration for constructing consciousness on current developments are closely tied together. Learning about the Holocaust means to understand developments in our societies. It is not only about the past. It has to do with us today. It is not only about memorizing facts, but to understand this topic as a brain challenge. It is about judgment. Democracies are based on passing main values and traditions and the new discussion about these topics from one generation to the next. From German studies we know that it is not clear if history classes are able to develop value judgment at all. The impact of history classes on the youth and their development regarding the main values are neither proven nor disproved. But we also know that if there's any development, it needs time. Following a Canadian study from 2004, teachers use 5 hours of teaching for Holocaust education and social studies classes. In Germany, teachers use 9 hours in history classes. Obviously, this is not enough time, as we've seen in the findings of the Israeli Foundation and Kava Stiftung. The Holocaust must serve as a perpetual reminder to all future generations to be on guard, to be in charge, as Friedman said, to be in charge for our democracies. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote already in 1835 about the ongoing connection between democracy and crisis. He stated that democracies are in the status of permanent crisis. This is their nature. And this nature is a huge problem. Because of being used to the status of permanent crisis, democracies do not realize when it turns seriously. Living in democracies means to take part, to discuss, to be affected, and sometimes to cause trouble. Being in a status of crisis means to be in a status of excitement. But democracies have the great virtue about being adaptable. But to be adaptable, democracies need individuals that take responsibility and be in charge. Students can only develop values with enough time and a connection to their daily life. Education and commemoration can make a difference, but it needs more than knowledge, as I figured out in my own life as an academic and teacher. Learning about the Holocaust means to be reminded of the dangers of intolerance and hatred and what it may lead to. It means to enable students to think about values and their own view in the world. Teachers and educators are carrying lots of responsibility. Their own personality is paramount, and so many of them do such an incredible job. Schools serve as a central location for memory and learning, but teachers need support. The National Holocaust Remembrance Committee of the Canadian Jewish Congress started to commemorate the Holocaust in Canada in 1973 publicly. Only 5 years later, the local Remembrance Committee in Toronto started Holocaust education programs to a larger extent. This included a summer teaching training institute, long-term collaboration with local school boards, production of Holocaust education curricula, professional development for teachers, lecture series, and an annual student seminar day on the Holocaust. Today, education weeks of the Holocaust, days of commemoration and remembrance take place all over Canada. These efforts are very important, but as I said before, learning about the Holocaust also means to understand the present, to make a connection to values young people are interested in and want to fight for, like freedom of thought and religion, or freedom of expression. Colleagues in Germany from the Technische Universität Berlin published in 2019 an expert opinion on anti-Semitism in schools. The authors suggested not to connect anti-Semitism with the Holocaust, because this would make an unallowed connection between the past and the present. The authors stress that anti-Semitism has to be discussed without moral impetus. But hatred of Jews, Judenhass, has to be discussed as a question of morality, of decency, of humanity. Therefore, it does make sense to talk about the history of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism today. I follow UNESCO in the global citizen education approach. I know that hatred needs to be addressed through education and empathy, and both includes a moral impetus. Teaching is more than just forwarding information and knowledge. It means to encourage self-reflection and critical thinking, brain challenge, as I mentioned before. There are lots of ideas, documents, guidelines, how to address anti-Semitism and to teach about the Holocaust. In the end, I can tell you, in front of class, being confronted with lacks of knowledge or anti-Semitic views, all of this is not very helpful. As I learned in interviews for my study on Holocaust education in Alberta and Hamburg, teachers do not feel prepared enough to talk about the topic. One reason is, for example, that Canada do not require courses at the university that address Holocaust education in order to become a certified teacher. Teachers do not feel confidence to approach the topic because there is not enough professional development within schools on the topic and no profound educational framework. But this is also true for Germany. When I said earlier that we need individuals to be in charge, I do not want to impose the entire responsibility to teachers who do not feel prepared enough due to structural shortcomings or students who do not get enough time to learn. I suggest to cancel the idea that school serves as a society central location for memory and learning, and instead I call for memory and learning as a task for the whole society. Keeping the moral compass and behave like a mensch makes the difference. That is why days like these are so important, because they affect and reach out to the entire society. The 27th of January is a day to remember and to commemorate not only for teachers, students, and victims, but for the entire society. And to commemorate in Calgary City Hall is a powerful sign and a wake-up call. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schmoll, for that incredibly thought-provoking presentation. Survivors, worthy rabbis, teachers, neighbors, friends, welcome here. Welcome here to this place that I often call Calgary's living room, because it is a place where we come together in community, where we remember, where we have difficult conversations, where we confront our past, where we build our future together. And I want to say thank you to every one of you for coming today on this incredibly important day. We're joined here, among many others, by all of my City Council colleagues, by our Minister of Health, Tyler Shandro, by some of his MLA colleagues. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And today is a solemn day, but it is also in some ways a hopeful day. It's hopeful because we are coming together. You know, the last time that I spoke to a large crowd in this room was not so long ago when I also had to light a candle. Many of you were here that day. I will point out, Rabbi Matisoff, the candle was on the table, not high up in the air this time. Much easier. Those of you who were there know what I'm talking about. But that's what this place is for. That's what community is for. That's what your city government is for all of us to be able to come together. And today, certainly, we remember the horrible, hateful actions of the Nazi regime. We remember oppression, we remember malice, we remember evil. Let's not forget that 75 years ago today, we also remember liberation. We remember people who worked hard and risked their lives and often lost their lives because they believed in peace and compassion and love and liberation. It wasn't so long ago that I got a call from Rabbi Matisoff. And he asked me to come to the airport, of all places, to meet an honored guest that he was bringing to Calgary. And I gotta tell you, I don't normally go to the airport to meet all the visitors of Calgary. But when your rabbi tells you to do something, you do it. And on that day, I had one of the most moving and most important interactions of my life. On that day, I met a woman called Marta Cohn. You know Marta's story, many of you will. That as a young woman, she went behind enemy lines to fight for the resistance in Nazi-occupied France. They thought a young Jewish woman might not get a lot of attention, and she could do a lot of work. And I had a beautiful conversation with her. But I said to her, and she's about this high, by the way, and I said to her, you deserve to rest. You've done a lot of work, you've told this story. And she looked up at me, and I said, you know, you're 95. And she looked up at me, and I never thought that a tiny 95-year-old woman could terrify me. But she did. Because she said to me, I live in the world today. I see what's happening in the world today. I see the division. I see the anger. I see the hatred. And you know what, Mayor? I've seen this story before. And I know what the next chapter is. That's why I can't stop. Those words had a profound meaning to me, and they continue to have a meaning every day. Because they remind me that yes, we live in a world, and I can quote the statistics, where hate crimes are up, where acts of anti-Semitism, discrimination, hatred, religious bigotry of all kinds are growing and growing and growing. But what's much more important than that is we have to understand how easy it is for us as a community to slip back. We have to understand that careless words from politicians, from leaders, from others, words that promote division and anger and hatred have very real repercussions. that words and acts and deeds that cause us to be insular, to think about ourselves, to think about our own tribes, are not what we are based on in this place. And we have to fight that every single day. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend a performance at the Central Library across the street. 12 immigrant and refugee women told their stories. And one of the women left me with an image that I am still processing now, 24 hours later. She said that here in Canada, we have the ability to hold people. And where she had come from, that ability had been gone. That she didn't feel held by her society, that she felt like she fell through her society into ours. And she said, we as Canadians can never forget our role in holding people. For so many years, we have said to people from every corner of this broken earth, come here, you'll be safe here. You're welcome here. Your kids and their kids and their kids will have extraordinary opportunity here. And we heard amazing stories today of exactly this place serving as exactly that. But it's not automatic. It doesn't just happen. Even here on this land, we've made so many mistakes. We have dropped so many that we should have been holding. But today isn't just about remembrance. Today isn't about talking about a dusty past that happened before most of us were born. It's about recommitting ourselves to that struggle every single day. When I heard Cantor Jayne recite in this place just now, and I heard that voice soar to the top of this extraordinary building in this living room, and I thought, these are words of sorrow. They're words of remembrance, but they're also words of defiance. They're also words of compassion. They're also words of mercy. They're also words of love. And ultimately, that is what we must work towards every single day. To send a message that right here, right now, on this land, not only do we remember the scope and scale, the unimaginable actions of so long ago, but we remember that evil was allowed to exist. And we remember that our job, today and every day, must be to stand against that evil. We must never, ever, ever forget what has transpired. So with that, I want to as well thank my colleague, Councillor Diane Colley Urquhart, for the great leadership she has chosen. And I do have a job to do. So I'm going to invite Councillor Colley Urquhart up along with Adam Silver, wherever he went. There you are. And I'd like to read the proclamation of today's day. I'll let you hold it and I'll read. International Holocaust Remembrance Day honors the 11 million people, including 6 million Jews, who died at the hands of the Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. The Holocaust was the result of anti-Semitism, racial nationalism, and hatred. A global and local commitment to eliminate anti-Semitism, racism, and discrimination is crucial to prevent such atrocities against humankind. Whereas the Holocaust must never be forgotten, yet 1 in 5 Canadian youth are unaware of the events that happened during the Holocaust. Whereas anti-Semitism, racism, and discrimination can only be overcome by ongoing education, awareness, and greater openness to diversity of culture and of perspective. Whereas Calgarians are encouraged to commit to eliminating all acts and/or expressions of anti-Semitism, racism, and discrimination in our community. Whereas over 8,000 people of the Jewish faith reside in Calgary, including Holocaust survivors and their families. Whereas Calgarians are encouraged to engage with and learn from our neighbors, including survivors and the families of survivors, and honor the memory of the millions who suffered and died during the Holocaust. On behalf of City Council and the citizens of Calgary, I hereby proclaim January 27th, 2020 as International Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Hallelujah!
Thank you, everyone. My name is Tyler Shandro. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Premier Kenny. Sorry, that's the second time I've had nerves and done that. My apologies. He makes fun of me now every time I call him Kennedy instead of Jason Kenney. On behalf of my colleagues as well at the Government of Alberta, on this most solemn of all days, to take part in the ceremony along with His Worship, Mayor Nenshi, members of the Council, my colleagues from the Legislature, survivors, Rabbi Matisov, Cantor Jayne, to join with the Jewish community in Calgary. On this day, 75 years ago, soldiers liberated more than 7,000 prisoners from the Auschwitz-Birkenau Nazi concentration and death camp. From 1940 to 1945, Auschwitz was the largest of 4 camps, operated by the Nazi regime in Poland, for the sole purpose of murdering the Jewish peoples of Europe and other enemies of the Third Reich. During the Second World War, the Nazi regime targeted and brutally murdered more than 6 million Jews because of their faith and their race. In remembering the Holocaust and paying tribute to the millions of victims, we affirm our commitment to fight Holocaust denial and the evils of anti-Semitism, as well as remembering the genocide itself. It is our responsibility to continue to educate further generations about the effects of prejudice and hatred. As Albertans, we know that there is no room for anti-Semitism. We are a province of welcoming, understanding, and hardworking people. Today we stand with survivors, their families, and friends to mourn, to acknowledge this unfathomable crime, and educate further generations about the Shoah. Thank you very much for having me.
Why are we gathered here today on the 27th of January to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day? The Jewish religion already has a day to commemorate its national and spiritual tragedies, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, on which we fast in mourning and cry in anguish, Eicha, how? Eicha yashva badad, ha'ira bati am, hayta ka'almana. How solitary she sits, the city once full of people, she has become like a widow. A cry originally written for Jerusalem 2.5 millennia ago, but equally descriptive of every formerly thriving Jewish community in Europe in the middle of the last century. This lament of the prophet Jeremiah over the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem and the slaughter and exile of our people from their lands is joined by many more kinot, elegies, added over millennia of tragedies and persecutions the followers of Judaism have faced, including the destruction and exile of the Second Temple, and so many others over our history. The Crusades, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and most recently the Holocaust. The 9th of Av is the day on which we struggle with ourselves and with our God over the incomprehensible magnitude of our most recent loss. As a Jewish nation, we have already selected another date, the 27th of the Hebrew month of Nisan, as Yom HaShoah, Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Day. Symbolically situated halfway between Passover, our ancient celebration of peoplehood and freedom, and Yom HaAtzmaut, our most recent national holiday and celebration of the fulfillment of our 2,000-year-old dream of a return to Zion and our own independent state. Yom HaShoah is the day on which we can reflect on the national tragedy of the Holocaust and say confidently, never again. Never again will the persecuted Jews of the world find no harbor to accept them. Never again will none be too many. Never again will the Jews of the world have no allies to come to their defense. Never again will those who have committed atrocities against humanity have a place on earth to hide from, where they are safe from those with the will and the means to bring them to justice. So why are we here today? on January 27th. You may or may not know that the Jewish religion is non-missionizing. While Judaism accepts sincere converts, we do not actively recruit others to our faith. This is because we believe that while we ourselves are bound by the obligations and commandments of the Torah and the covenants between our forefathers and God, we do not extend this requirement to all humanity. Judaism teaches that for the rest of the nations of the earth, a life of goodness and meaning and eternal reward are possible through adherence to a few simple ethical demands known as the Noahide laws, obligations to refrain from murder, violence, theft, animal cruelty, and the various barbarities of ancient pagan cultures. In addition to these ethical requirements for every individual human, there is one additional Noahide law that we believe binds entire societies: the requirements to form fair governments and systems of justice, so that the weak and the oppressed can seek relief, and the guilty, even when powerful, can be swiftly brought to justice. January 27th, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, marks the date in 1945 when Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp, was liberated. This was the day that the scale of the horror of the Holocaust was fully, clearly, and unassailably laid bare to the world. It is the day on which the family of nations proclaimed, 80 years ago we failed, our leaders unfair and unreasonable in relief of the oppressed, our armies tardy in enforcing justice, our globe's free nations blind to man's capacity for evil, and to the knowledge that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. Today, International Holocaust Remembrance Day, is the day that the rest of the world, that civilization, says to the Jews, never again. Never again will we be blind to such evils. Never again will we let such evil triumph by doing nothing. Never again will we fail in our obligations. I am proud to live in a city that has made clear this message to its own Jewish community and to the world at large. A city committed to continuing to educate its population about the Holocaust and to do its part to ensure never again. Thank you to all of those who organized and participated in today's meaningful ceremony. Thank you to the City of Calgary staff and the Calgary Jewish Federation staff and volunteers who are putting together such an important program. Yasher Koach to the students of Halpern Akiva Academy and the Calgary Jewish Academy, and to Cantor Jayne for their beautiful singing. Thank you to our speakers, Dahlia Libin, Sid Cyngiser, and Melanie Carina Schmoll. Thank you to the 4 generations of the Cyngiser and Libin families for providing extra meaning to the candle lighting ceremony. Thank you to the entire City Council for your efforts towards this day, to Mayor Nenshi for your thoughtful words, to Councillor Colley Urquhart for your instrumental work in organizing this day and leading the charge for the recent notice of motion combating anti-Semitism in Calgary. Thank you to Minister Shandro for your thoughtful message on behalf of the province and Premier. Thank you to the rest of the dignitaries from all levels of government, from our law enforcement services, and from so many of our community's institutions. I would like to once again acknowledge all of the Holocaust survivors here with us, as well as their families and the families of the victims of the Shoah. Deepest appreciation to the members of the Canadian and Allied forces who gave so much to rid the world of such evil, and to their families, and to the current members of the Canadian Armed Forces who continue to defend our freedoms. I thank you all for joining with us here on this important day. Please rise as the students of Halpern Akiva Academy lead us in Hatikvah.
Ayin Lassi
Thank you.